Welcome. Logan Meaux. How's it going, man? Thank you for coming into town and coming in. And how was your drive? I hear it was a little bit stressful down here from Baton Rouge.
I didn't know if this would be included in, the overall all expenses paid trip, but I did get a probably going to get in the mail a traffic light ticket from the way in on St. Charles. So
no good.
Other than that and the traffic, I think it was a great trip.
Speaking of innovative ideas and things like that, things that we're going to get into on this podcast, seems like it still might be a good idea to have some kind of high speed rail, or if nothing else, maybe a party cruise down from Baton Rouge into New Orleans for a Friday that's gridlocked.
Anything but driving on on the bridge on the way in.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks again for being here and for the sacrifice. You and I have worked together now, probably going on a couple years or something. I'm not even sure. And certainly I've felt like a part of your family at times. But why don't you tell everybody, out there that's a little bit less familiar, your name, where you're from, and your new business entity.
Yeah, so I'm Logan Meaux. I'm originally from Dallas, but moved to Lake Charles when I was about in 7th grade. And I started a company about 3 years ago, Mallard Bay, which is a marketplace for booking guided hunting and fishing trips. And so we provide the software for outfitters, who are people who take other people hunting and fishing for a living, and then also people that are sportsmen, people looking to go on those trips. So that's what we do now, and kind of other background besides that is working for my dad at Waiter, which I know you were involved in, and that was kind of something that was good for the state of Louisiana, right?
Yeah, that's very cool. That's a unique perspective that not everyone has. So, for those folks out there that don't know, Chris Meaux, founder of Waiter, probably the fastest growing company in Louisiana's history, was your dad. And you kind of had a front row seat, I guess primarily as a college student through that period. So, maybe that's a good place to start. What was that like, being a family member of a CEO growing a company, from zero to $1.5 billion worth of market cap in 5 years? It's crazy. What was that like?
It was very interesting from the beginning because I had no idea what was happening. So I knew that my dad had started a company. He would go to Startup Weekend and things were, he was pitching investors and all that stuff. But up until that point, it was a whole lot of nothing, failure, kind of just hard on our family as a whole. But once Waiter started, things kind of started to change. It was a slow growth. Like I would have, looking back on it, 7 years in total, wouldn't have never thought that it took that long. But at 16, started working for Waiter, replaced my dad as a delivery driver. And then from that point on, it was delivery driver, customer service, then I did finance analyst. But the worst part of that was customer service, because high growth startup, it's a needless to say, it's a shit show. But
no, that's nuts.
It's not always fun.
Were you the first driver? Were you the first non Chris Meaux driver?
So the founders were all drivers before anybody else.
Awesome.
I was on paper the 12th employee technically, which at that point they had people entering menus and all that stuff. So I tried that for $7.25 an hour. I tried to enter menu data. That was not my thing. But that's how I made my first $1,000, was driving for Waiter.
That is super cool. And then it must give you perspective doing your own company now to truly understand how much sometimes a founder has to go all in on something to make it big, right? I like you said, there's a lot of sacrifice there, but you've also seen the flip side of it when it pays off. And I can't think of another example that's almost better, where somebody kind of goes all in, goes for it, and really, pulls out something incredible. It's nuts.
At 19, it's weird. It was a very weird and surreal experience to go to the NASDAQ at 19. And it's like one of those things after seeing what happened after going public, I'm not sure if I want to take a company public ever. But I always tell people this, like, oh, so you want to take the company public? I'm like, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. I think for a lot of founders that really have never seen any effect of it, it's one of those things where you might have it on your bucket list, but then, really what a going public event is, a lot of times it's more of a financing event than a liquidity event. And sometimes people get money back from it. And in that case, a lot of people did get a lot back. But it's also about growing the company in the future and doing more with it, which a lot of people don't know. And hopefully you have a company with a lot of different paths at its disposal. In hindsight, it's always 20/20 in any situation, but it's good to know that you kind of are looking at different options for this next thing. And so, how did you pick this particular area? Like you said, I think you're if I understand correctly, you're basically, allowing people who want to go on hunting and fishing trips or other outdoor excursions, maybe kayaking or whitewater rafting, something like that. And then you're helping put them with people who are experts in that field, who know the right place to go, do it safely, and kind of creating a marketplace for them to transact business. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, in a nutshell, right now our niche is focused strictly on the hunting and fishing side of things, and then the software itself can be applied to a lot of different industries, whether it's kayaking, rock climbing, whatever it is. You could take our software and brand it under any large brand, say Orvis or something like that later on, right? That's like a potential exit, right, for us. Mm-hmm. But for me, starting Mallard Bay was just from my own problem. It was my dad and I tried to plan a surprise trip for my dad and I. So I got his secretary when we were at Wader, mm-hmm. got her to plan behind his back a trip, got hotels, everything, go up to Oklahoma. Well, once we got there, we realized we were supposed to be hunting for 3 days or 3 hunts, and it turned to 1 hunt with 13 other hunters, and we didn't fire a single shot. So on the way back was when I was like, this is a problem. I was like, how can like Airbnb do this? But there's nobody doing this in the hunting and fishing industry. Yeah. And so that's how that started. And honestly, along the way, it wasn't very easy. Yeah. I did the exact same thing my dad did. Go out and try to find co-founders, right? And you think that everybody wants to jump on board and everybody understands like how to split up a company and how mm-hmm. it's supposed to work. And I think that was around the time that we started talking when y'all incorporated everything in December of that. That's crazy. In December of 2019, right before the pandemic.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy timing. Well, there's a bunch there. First of all, I should go on record just saying, what a great guy I think your dad is and how good he's been to me. And, you have a solid foundation there to draw from, professional experience, but just a great guy too. And so did you guys, like, throughout your life growing up, was hunting and fishing a big part of your kind of upbringing and activity? Yeah.
So my first hunt with my dad was when I was 5 years old. Yeah. I had a BB gun. He woke me up at the crack of dawn, dragged me out into a field in the middle of West Texas. It was freezing cold, so I'm wearing all his clothes, all oversized hunting clothes. And at kind of once we got there, dug a shallow grave. So you dig a grave in a peanut field and put a board on top of you. And it was from that point on, I was like, I'm not sure if I like this. But once kind of everything started to transpire, the sun rose and shots started to go off. I mean, we've been hunting buddies ever since. It's crazy. Awesome.
It's funny because I grew up in here in New Orleans in the city. I didn't have a family that was big into hunting and fishing, but all my friends do, and obviously we're in a state where that's such a big deal. So to me, one of the cool things about your platform is that I've started to get into more of this stuff as I gotten older, mm-hmm. and I find that it's harder when you're older and you don't have like the kind of familial support network teaching you where to go and how to hunt and fish and things like that. It's almost harder. So like a good site where you can find vetted guides or people to teach you is pretty cool, and I find that pretty fascinating. So it might be too early to know, but do you know if like your users skew toward super experienced hunters that are looking for the newest and best thing, or is it people like me maybe, or is it a mixture of the two?
I'd say our users are more skewed towards kind of like what you're saying, but people that are used to going on guided trips. Mm-hmm. They go on 2 to 3 guided trips a year. But sometimes those people get burned on a particular outfitter. If they try to find a new experience, they have a bad experience, and then they kind of in a nutshell, they don't have the time to do it themselves, right? They don't want to do that. Mostly because of the profession or what kind of job they're in. It just doesn't allow for that type of freedom to get off a week or two off of the year. So they only have these couple free weekends, right? So it's they want these trips to be a vacation. Right. And so that's really what we try to target is like people that are looking to go on these trips as like a vacation, meals included, lodging, all of those different things. Now, of course, we offer like a wide range of trips. So it's anything from, $250 a day to like, a $14,000 elk, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And one of the other things you had mentioned in your discussion a minute ago was like the process of finding co-founders. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things I've noticed in doing this for so long is that there's like a direct, almost one-to-one correlation between founders that really quickly, immediately identify good co-founders that are a good fit and success, and then ones that don't do that. And they're kind of like, more of a lone operator, mm-hmm. adding people. I've had challenges with that in the past, with some of my companies that have been quite successful and profitable, but still would have been a lot easier if I had more people like helping with a vested stake. How did you know how to know to do that, and B, what did you do to get your co-founders? Because probably a lot of people out there are having the same thing. Maybe their friends are still in school, or maybe they're working. I know it's not easy for a founder who's got this like ambitious idea to sell people on that dream and then get them on board. What did you do there, and how did you know to do it so early?
So luckily, I did have an advantage with having the way my dad started his company was he messaged people at McMeese and the local school, and I was in school, right? Okay. But I kind of played at both sides. I had missteps with co-founders at the beginning, people that so I started with 4 other co-founders. Yeah. Maybe 5. I think maybe it might have been 5, right? And so 4 of them were developers. So I thought that was great because I couldn't decide on 2 teams of 2. Mm-hmm. So I decided I was going to have, it's like, okay, they essentially all knew how to code in a way, but 2 of them didn't want to be coders. They wanted to be entrepreneurs. They just knew how to code because they knew that was the best way to start. And what ended up happening was they couldn't agree on how to build the platform. They simply just didn't do anything for the first 3 months because they wanted to use different technologies and all these different things. So what ended up happening was that we parted ways with 2 of the co-founders and was just like, I don't think this is the right fit. This is during COVID. And they agreed. They wanted to build it very quickly, MVP, quick and dirty, then rebuild it. And I was like, well, maybe we could go a different direction than that. And so what I ended up with was essentially out of that group of 4 developers was 1 technical co-founder. And he was the one that knew how to code and how to build a platform from the ground up. Now, he built it from in a way that was like new technologies for him, so it took a little longer. But if I wouldn't have known from the way my dad started to build it, I wouldn't have known to just go look around in my personal network and be like, okay, this person can code, this person can't, like that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So it really was just honestly what happened was one of my friends' girlfriends, her brother was the other co-founder that ended up being Tam, who is now my co-founder.
Very cool. And I mean, I would you do you ever think you could have gotten to where you are today without having done it that way?
Oh, I mean, I think it was a great way to get through COVID in a sense of like allow COVID to kind of like flush the true people out. So like it was me after COVID, it was just me and Tam. Mm. It was essentially me and Tam, and it was us two. And I was like, well, what do we do now? Like it's technical co-founder, I'm a business guy, but I need someone else. So once I met Joel in mergers and acquisition class at LSU, he just came up to me one day and was like, hey, I saw you put out this video on LinkedIn. Like, I started my own thing and I really look up to your dad is really what it is. He looked up to my dad. Like the first time we got on a phone call, he was like, oh, I can't believe I just talked to Chris Meaux. And I'm like, that's my dad. Like, you know, like, and so we just started meeting once a week after class.
That's awesome.
It was kind of one of those things. And then I kind of tapped a gift of gab, one of my best friends from growing up, to be the other co-founder. So that's how we ended up as 4 of us.
That's cool. And how do you guys, obviously there's so many ups and downs with founders and businesses in general. You know, it can be hard at times to like, you know, ensure everybody's kind of getting along. And do you guys have any special secret that makes that easier? Or, you know, I always find it fascinating to see how people are mixing the personal and business, because, you know, if people haven't already gotten a sense of that, like that's part of this podcast is like how intimately personal it is to start these businesses and how you're going all in. And it's like your families are on board, your friends are getting part of it a lot of times. How does that, you know, what's the secret there as far as you could tell so far? It's early, obviously, but what do you think it is so far?
I would say that there's no real set way to do things. It's all about how each person on the team communicates and understanding, you know, how people perceive you know, sometimes when you say things, but really it's about taking off the friend or co-founder hat and putting on, you know, what your actual role in the company hat is. And then also making sure that like everybody that's on the co-founding team understands that just because you're a co-founder doesn't mean your role won't change. Like change is constant. And really focusing on that has helped us stay together to this point. And really right now, like we're going through some changes on the co-founding teams in terms of like, you know, who's doing what role, and the way a person handles that says a lot about them. So it's kind of one of those things that at the same time can go so wrong. Like, I mean, co-founders can really just, you know, it's like a band breaking up, right? Yeah. It can happen like that.
Yeah, and very similar. I mean, you're traveling a lot with people. You're up morning, noon, night, you know, nights, weekends. It's a constant kind of thing usually for people that are going to make it work. And, you know, one of my core values has always been adaptation and adaptability. And in the startup world, especially, you know, before you're like a really big corporation, everybody's wearing all these hats, everybody's doing different things, and you know, you there's gonna be conflict. It's not like a question of if there will be. If there will be, it's kind of like how does everybody do it? I've always found too, like there has to be a lot of mutual respect, like and willingness and ability for people not to take things too personally. Like, you know, roles are gonna evolve. They're not even always static. Like, you know, I've seen it with my own organizations where maybe somebody prior to having more people come in and make it a different group may have had a role for a long time as it was before, and then it kind of becomes clear, well, maybe not everybody's playing to their strengths. And that's a really hard conversation because so many people are investing themselves personally into this, and it sounds like you guys are facing that, or like just like every other company. And I don't know if there's a secret way that anybody has to make it successful. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's kind of like dealing with everybody's personalities, understanding who they are and accepting that, and then trying to come together so that everyone's kind of following their best parts, you know.
Yeah. Well, you're not always going to find consensus.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that never really helps a startup finding consensus, because that's when you go to perfection. So, I mean, you can't be perfect as a startup at all.
Right. Yeah. No, that's absolutely true. So, you know, you guys are at a pretty interesting phase. You've done, I guess, a couple seed rounds now, maybe, you know, and that's pretty common these days too. A lot of people, you know, they raise, you know, a chunk in a seed round, get the product off the ground, get some new customers, or they have some existing customers. They've proved out some things, and then they kind of do a second seed. What's been I guess the most surprising thing about fundraising for you today?
To me, one of the most surprising things about fundraising is how much of a skill it is to convince people to give you money as like, and tell your story to people in a way that is geared towards, okay, like I want this person to know who I am and why I'm going to succeed, and that, you know, regardless of anything else, that I'm going to make this company successful. And that's one of the things that Joel and I were talking about the other day. It's like, you know, when you look at everything, it's like, what skill have we learned the most over the last, you know, year? It's how to convince other people to give us money. Yeah. In a good way. I mean, it's we want to make our investors money. Like, we're not just getting it for the sake of getting it. Like, we want to give a return on that investment. But it's one of those things. It's time kills all deals. I think we learned that the most this past round. That is, Claire may understand. We've let time kill a few deals, and that happens. Yeah. But it's one of those things that it's a skill that a lot of founders ignore and or automatically write themselves off as not being able to do. And I am very privileged in the way that I've been introduced to investors by my dad and everything. But I will say that this last round, you know, tapping Joel's network, tapping my network, tapping just people around us is, you know, we've done a lot of that on our own. Like,
oh yeah. I mean, I can vouch for that. I mean, a lot of the investors have come from you guys, and, you know, a lot of people can put somebody in front of an investor. And look, that's where I've spent the majority of my professional life for, I mean, I don't know, 15 or so years at this point. And I mean, a lot of people can build a nice product. A lot of people can do different aspects of business, but, you know, you cannot scale a company without somebody on the team, most of the time the CEO, who knows how to fundraise. And that same skill seems to be correlated with the person that the people in the organization that can also convey the vision to first get founders on board, then early employees, because this is all a team effort. Nobody can do on their own. So what do you how do you start off your pitch meetings with investors? Like, do you just kind of chat them up and then get into your deck? Do you go right into your deck? Do you feel it out? How do you approach that?
So the most recent strategy that we've been using, and kind of to your point, is that most of the time it's one person that is able to kind of convince investors. But what Joel and I have the advantage of is Joel's just as good at it as I am.
That's great.
And so when we're together in doing it, I tell the story and I let Joel go into kind of the part that is needing to be rehearsed, in some ways rehearsed, right? It's always said a different way, right? But I say things completely different every single time I go to it. So we segue together, and then when we get into Q&A, it's both of us. We know which questions play to our strengths, and we'll just kind of take them as they go. Like, I love Q&A. I love Q&A, and I know that most founders hate Q&A.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. I would say 100%. And I'm on both sides of this these days. You know, as an investor, a VC, and I've always been on the founder side of the table. I've been in most of the pitch meetings of most of my clients. There's a few exceptions. Like, I've actually never had to do that with y'all, which is nice. But I mean, what a lot of people don't know is there are a lot of companies that have sold for hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars, where, like, I was literally part of every pitch of their first several meetings with all their investors. And that was their first pitch, right? I had already had the luxury of being through a bunch of them. Now I've been in thousands of pitch meetings. Right. But the pitch, you know, the presentation, the polished things that you want to say as a founder, like, those are fine. And for non-professional investors, that stuff may be the thing that gets you the check. But for the big checks and the people that are really going to invest money and make a big difference, it's all about the interaction. Like, it's a contact sport, right? Like, you've got to have the ability to think on your feet and have thought through the questions that people are going to have. I mean, I don't know. Were you pre-pitching people you knew? Were they beating you up on the whole thing? Was that part of your process before you got out there? Or did you learn that as you went through it?
So I don't know do you remember when Joel and I pitched you and Hal and Nick for the first time?
I don't remember the first time. I'm getting old and it's not quite as good, but yeah, I do. Well, I remember early pitches and you, I mean, as you know, like, for clients, like that is how I started this on my own. You know, coming from a really big firm in Silicon Valley where there was like a pipeline of all the big names of the tech world, starting my own, like I couldn't afford to make mistakes.
Right.
So like I vetted my clients. I picked them based on how they pitched. My first one in the world was Lucid. So
Right.
I saw Patrick pitch, and I'm like, I gotta work with those guys. So I went and told them, you know, here's my experience. So I was pitching them to be able to work with that same thing. The next, you know, so my first like 20 clients who have become kind of the biggest names in the tech world here were people I was pitching, they were pitching. I was helping them learn in many cases how to pitch investors and structure deals. So it's been I was lucky to have the ability to go through all these kinds of pitch meetings and be part of it, because a lot of lawyers don't ever do that. They're just kind of like sitting. So I'm glad you brought that up, because I there's a lot of stuff I don't get involved with because I can't, if I don't believe in it, like I can't really help. Like I can't, if I feel like I can destroy the company thesis in 2 seconds, like they're not going to get through any investors I know, and it's probably not going to go that far, you know.
Right.
But a lot of people don't look at it that way. But no, I'm sorry, you were telling about when you first pitched, you know, me and Hal and.
No, I was just curious if there was something that stood out in that first pitch, because I think that pitch for Joel and I was like a turning point of confidence.
Okay.
Because, you know, once we had Calais behind us, like it was like it went from, you know, 100,000 to 50,000, then we're halfway there to a $300,000 round, and then all of a sudden we're oversubscribed. Yeah. Right. It's that momentum to capitalize on that. And also like fielding a pitch and doing Q&A, or not Q&A with my dad, but really hearing how he would respond to a certain type of question. That is also some, you know, investors ask questions that they want to trip you up. They want to see how you think on your feet. They want to see if you're going to answer a question that you don't know the answer to. And most of the time, the way Joel and I handle that is just, you know, we're very much in tune with like who we are and you know, which part of the business we play to. And that's kind of been our advantage.
Yeah, I mean, I tell that to people all the time. Like, and you can tell a lot about a founder too. The ones that react really negatively to the Q&A and the interaction part, they're going to be usually very hard to work with. And that is also like a thing that I've always done, screening for legal clients. And, you know, certainly as an investor, that is the quickest thing where I just will stop looking at a deal. I'm like, the person can't even, you know, respond to like a question posed or an alternative viewpoint. And the ones that do really well, that says something about their character a lot of times and their ability to adapt to change. And, you know, the investing process too is, it's, you know, a lot of, I've noticed lately, especially as the world has become a little bit more Shark Tanky, like people think they go to events and they get funded at events, which just isn't true. It has nothing to do with how this really works. Like the expectation is almost like, our investor write a check and then, but don't tell me anything about business. I don't want to hear it. And they're kind of almost fingers in the ears. It's become very interesting. But, you know, the way this really works is that an investor is giving you money and they're usually getting involved because they've been a part of some similar venture or they see a gap where they can help lend assistance. So, you know, it's very much that people who are certain check writers aren't going to want to have anything to do with it. But there's two kinds of check writers. They're not all the same. And, you know, you have to be able to deal with the Q&A because I'm sure you can attest, and I'm going to ask you about it. You know, when you have a board of directors and you have stakeholders, they are going to express their viewpoint. And part of the founder and the CEO's job is to, you know, take all these different viewpoints from everybody in the room, synthesize it, you know, address what you think is right, kind of dismiss but tell why you think something's not right. And the Q&A gets to that in a heartbeat. So you got to kind of have the disposition to be able to deal with that. It's because it feels like criticism, right? Like,
right. That I think that's something that Joel and I do so well during Q&A. And honestly, until you started mentioning like the defensiveness that some co-founders get, is like we'll talk after a Q&A or after thing, he was like, well, that was an ambush. Like basically like, but in the moment we say, thank you for your question. Like, we've got this question a lot. This is, our thoughts on that. That's how we take those questions that, some founders may take as like a personal attack, which to me is like, they're not personally attacking you. They're just trying to de-risk their investment. They want you in that moment to de-risk their decision, essentially.
Yeah, for sure. And like, I know for me, I can't speak for any other parties, but like for me, it's usually a genuine like curiosity, like, or I'm asking a question because I've gone through some experience before where I'm like, I wonder if they've thought about this. It's not meant to like, make anybody feel bad or anything like that. And the truth is, as you've probably seen, like the world of venture capital and starting a business in general, it's brutal. Like people aren't going to really sugarcoat it for you too much. It's not like being in school. It's not like other things where there's this like support network built in and everybody's like comforted. Like you're going to get beat up. You're gonna feel dumb sometimes, but you got to look at it like, I'm gonna come out of this conversation next time I'll know the answer to that question, and like those are legitimate points. I think if you look at it as an opportunity to solve problems you haven't thought of, that's probably the key thing.
And then also in most situations when investors asking you questions, they're really trying to find out if they can provide value to the company. I mean, it comes across as to some people that, like they don't think we know what we're doing or that sort of thing. But really, they're just trying to make sure that they're the right investor for you because they have a certain amount of want to be involved in the company. And especially if they think your idea is cool, which is something that we have the advantage of when we are pitching investors is, we play to our audience. We pitch people that are sportsmen, people that do what we like to do. And it really helps on that front.
That's awesome. We mentioned about, a lot of times when you get an investment, especially kind of the sizes you've gotten, they, comes with a new thing called the board of directors.
Yeah, the board. I forgot we were going to talk about the board.
Yeah, so what's your perspective on how to make a board function well? Like, and there's a lot that goes on with that. Like, I'd like to know how you think about it. Like, when do you know to go to the board for approval versus you can kind of decide it on your own? And what was your process like, picking board members? Yeah,
so luckily from the start with us, my dad's chairman of the board. I lean on him to call the board meetings, timing on that. I definitely bring the agenda and what we want to talk about, company overview, all that sort of thing. And then one of the most important things for us with the board is like building a personal relationship with your kind of first outside board member. And for me, that was Hal.
Okay.
And so
for those people who don't know, probably everybody who watches is going to know, you're talking about Hal Calais.
Yeah.
Who's also a partner of mine in the venture fund. So he was your first kind of outside investor.
Yeah.
Coming in. Okay.
Yeah. So with my dad having committed in the round and then Calais coming in, that gave us that momentum to push through. And the only other board member for me right now is my grandfather. So it's very much a
Julius.
Yes. Yeah. So it's very much a vote by consensus. Yeah. There's not a lot of conflict there. And my dad actually mentioned that with I think their board at Boom Nation, they have 6. And I'm like how do you get votes across? Well, we have an even number too.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really thinking about that when I asked the question. I was like, well, how do you get votes across? And he was like, well, we vote by consensus. We don't have, the vote go one way or another. Right. It's I control the board.
Yeah. And
it's one of those things where if I wouldn't have gone and built a personal relationship with Hal, really got to understand how Hal operates, and I think of him as a friend. Yeah. And the insight and advice that he gives me in our calls. I mean, we're on a bi-weekly meeting now, but it's one of those things where you just have to listen. Mm-hmm. And when you're listening, you are going to take tidbits here and there. But if you were going to listen and then come up with an action plan on every single item that they could, you're not going to be able to do that.
Right.
Like, it's just one of those things. I mean, you know how. I mean, like...
Right. Well, yeah. And I mean, regardless of him, he every board member has a different style, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I think the point you're making is a really good one, which is there's a balance between, as you're kind of tasked, I think, is what you're saying, with like balancing all the different viewpoints so that a vote is really a formality. Like, it's not like you're coming up with a plan for the first time at a board meeting, telling people the plan, and then asking for a vote for approval, right? Because that would be a disaster.
That would not go very well.
But a lot of people really don't know this, and I feel like there's a lack of kind of coaching out there, because I know I've been part of boards where very much it seems like the founders view it as, I'm going to come up with all the ideas on my own without running them past people first, and then I'm going to beat it up with a few people that I kind of, there's usually an echo chamber. Yeah, there might be advisors, or maybe it's all internal. They might just, two co-founders might agree on something, and they've really gotten no input or perspective from anybody else. Then they show up to a board meeting, and then they don't have like a final agreement. They don't have a final plan. It's kind of an outline. They're like, we want approval to kind of go do whatever we want on this big thing. And I'm like, that's not the approval process. You sort of have to go build consensus offline outside of the board meeting. Be prepared for the board members in the board meeting to add a bunch of stuff to your list of things to do, or tell them politely, I don't think I can focus on this, here's why. And then by the time you're asking for approval, you have it. It's done, right?
Yeah.
And that's a good lesson if you've learned that quickly. And I think, I've kind of noticed that your board is pretty easygoing, and you guys, you're not going to have a lot of disagreements because you're not surprising one another with stuff out of the blue. Like, you're incorporating everybody's feedback ahead of time.
Right. Like, you mentioned when we were talking about like getting a bonus plan for the sales team. Like, I've talked to Hal and my dad about that twice already. Right. We haven't had the board meeting yet. We've already brought this up several times before we even go to and then also one thing is like, this is what I've learned for my next coming board meeting is like, just saying what you're going to vote on at the beginning, and not like starting the meeting and having the meeting and then be like, okay, now we're going to decide what we're going to vote on. No, just put it out there at the beginning. Yeah.
And I am a proponent of not really having many votes at a board meeting, because again, I'm kind of a stickler being a corporate lawyer guy. I'd prefer that everybody just do the action by written consent, so exactly what's being approved. And most of the time, I think what people, it's a lot of founders tend to go through the thing where they're like, they don't have anybody else involved, so they're doing whatever they want. Then they get new stakeholders and investors involved, and they have a board, and they're not sure when to get their opinion on stuff or not. And the way I tell them is like, look, on anything material, you've got to go get everybody's opinion ahead of time. And then if somebody during that process somebody feels really strongly like they know an area they want to participate in that decision, you got to just keep them in the loop as if they're like an employee. And if they get annoyed getting all the emails, then fine, then they'll tell you. But just keep them in the loop, because they don't want to show up where they think they're part of the process, and then they're just like, oh yeah, here, approve this please. Like, you're guaranteeing that they're not going to approve it.
Yeah, they didn't get to play a part in the decision-making process, in a sense.
And, I'm not saying founders should let investors or other directors run the show by any means, but I think the implicit bargain in this game that we're playing, like in the venture capital game, what the expectations are, is that when you take somebody's money and they are on the board, that is the handshake you're making. Like, that's the expectation they have, that they're, no one's going to do anything material without talking to them first and working through issues. And sometimes, sometimes in super big stuff, there are going to be disagreements, and there might be like a 3-2 vote or a 3-1 vote. It's going to happen sometimes, but the process is everything. And I think it's good that you're picking up on it. And I'm trying to figure out ways to actually get out there to tell people more, my view, because like I find myself as a director representing a fund that, like, I take for granted all what my clients do, because I help say, like, did you check the board, make sure you get all these things, like things that come second nature. So most of the boards of companies I've worked with for years are pretty smooth, and like they know the process, whereas some of the ones I'm getting on for the first time, like that they didn't always have somebody to tell them like, here's how to make this stuff work really smooth. And then people also want to get approval for everything. Like, you don't need approval to go hash out a deal that you're not committing the company to. You have approval as an officer to go like negotiate an acquisition or talk to like talk to like a strategic partner, but you got to get everybody's feedback in the process and then present it.
Yeah, that's been one of the things my dad has just taught me is like, he just asked me when I run something by him. First off, he was like, he got involved in Boom Nation like a lot more. And he was like, "Oh, well, you don't tell me anything anymore." And I'm like, "Well, I think you're just like, I'm not obviously, yeah, I don't want you to baby me, right?" But he's like, he'll ask me if I've run something by Hal, and I'm like, sometimes he'll remind me and be like, "Okay, yeah, I got to run that by Hal if I'm going to do something." Like, it just those they don't require votes. It just requires you to have told them about it and discussed it before.
100%. And look, that makes me laugh because. Yeah, that's a family board member, like, even saying the question. And like, that's one of the best consensus builders within an organization I've ever seen. And I think that's the lesson. Like, all of the great founders are people that inherently have that built in and that understanding of the bargain. That, like, everybody's part of this. If you're alienating people because you want to feel like it's your company and you're running the show and somebody will like, that's the wrong, you're gonna create conflict there. It's not the dynamic that's gonna it's not gonna last long one way or another if that's the dynamic that's getting created. Like, I'm gonna do what I want and just run this by everybody for a rubber stamp. Like, that's not a good thing, right? So congrats to you. What about like, what are some traction metrics and milestones that you guys have hit that you're pretty proud of at this point?
So, metrics that we've hit that we're proud of thus far, for our year one goal on outfitters acquisition, we've hit 179. Well, we're over 215 now. Wow! But our year one goal was 179. We're over 200 now. That's mainly been word of mouth, referrals, cold calling. These guys are sometimes hard to reach, and so we're very proud of the fact that we were able to hit that goal. And then our next goal is that gross bookings number for the year is 2.5 million. It's a lofty goal compared to where we're at now, but we're entering right into the busy season, and we're having our best month now. And it's one of those things that, we're capitalizing on the momentum of the season. We've got availability, we have supply. So those things seem to be falling in place. But also, we've just surpassed 1,000 users.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that was a very. It kind of happened, and we didn't like. It wasn't like, oh, we were counting down. It just like I looked and it was like, oh, okay, yeah.
And that's mostly organic, I guess, at this point, right?
Yeah. So that is majority organic. Especially the last 400 users have been, we're not promoting, hey, go sign up. Right. Like, it's just, we're running, of course, good content, advertising. We're putting out good content on Instagram, and people are just signing up because once you go to book, you gotta sign up.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. What other kinds of, I guess, what are the things that are, keep you up at night as a founder at this point? Like, I don't think you ever fully get away from that. Even after you've made it, there's always something. But what are the things what's on your radar? Like, things you want to stay ahead of, to make it run smooth going forward.
I think right now what we're really focusing on is process. Mm-hmm. The way we do things, what I call the Mallard Bay way. Nice. It's not coined that yet. We haven't branded that term exactly, but we really want to focus on documenting everything that we're doing and making sure that the people that are doing certain tasks are the right person for that task, and that everybody's kind of. I know people always end up having to do things they don't want to do, but at the end of the day, we need to make sure that if you don't want to do something, that you at least write the process down and can delegate it to somebody else.
Yeah. that's awesome too. Like it takes a lot of people don't learn that till way far down the road. And I mean, what you're building is an institution, right? You got to take care of the paperwork. You got to take care of
that's me and you,
yeah,
and Claire,
and you got to take care of the people, make them feel good to a degree, and then you also got to make sure they're performing well. You got to make sure that they're documenting stuff for people that are going to come under them, or if they move positions, like we said. It's scaling it is all about the people and the process, and you can't have happy people if you haven't documented the process, right?
Right.
So that's really cool that you're continuing to do that, and it sounds like the Mallard Bay way. I don't know if you'll end up calling it that or not, but it sounds like you're kind of coming up with a governing plan or a company operating system. And same thing. Some of the best companies I've ever worked with have started building that as part of the culture. Yeah. Like you want people to know like how the company does stuff,
right? Without
it just being transmitted verbally, right? Is that part of your plan?
Yeah. So, are you familiar with EOS?
Yeah.
That's what we're doing right
great.
now. So we're in the process of doing EOS.
And for people that don't know what that stands for, what is that?
So Entrepreneur Operating System. Essentially, there's a book called Traction you can go out and buy, and it gives you a step-by-step process. Kind of it's almost like the learnings of all the best business books, like Good to Great. It's got a lot of Good to Great in it, and other books. I don't really know what other books that it kind of in the beginning it kind of, but it gives you that hey, step 1, step 2, step 3. This is how you should run a meeting. This is how you run your leadership meeting. This is how you establish like quarterly rocks, all that different things. So it is an uphill battle to get that installed throughout the organization. Right. I will say,
right.
But like my dad says, we're entering company building mode.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's a big thing, and you guys are getting into you have some employees, right? But not a ton. So you're getting into that process new. I mean, how important is it to have that stuff when you onboard people?
Oh, I mean, very, very. Yeah. I mean, I'm HR and legal right now, aside from you. So
right.
It's one of those things that I need to put those step-by-step processes down and pass that to somebody else.
Otherwise, they're just coming to you.
Yeah,
you can't get anything done.
No,
right?
it's just it's always popping up and one of those things that you can never seem to get a handle on.
Look, it's the hardest thing for me, especially like. You have to force yourself, and you have to set aside the time. I'm going to have to write down, provide a bunch of learning and examples in a place that people can find. Otherwise, they're just going to come to you and make life miserable. And you're not building the company. You're not building the organization. Then you are the like wiki resource.
Yeah.
You don't want to be the wiki in your own company. So that's really cool that you're doing. I've seen a lot of companies basically get a bunch of funding and then kind of interview for like culture fit or friendliness or whatever their main characteristics are looking for, but they haven't documented that stuff, and every one of their metrics goes down. They can't figure it out, and they're like, well, I brought in all these people and we should be performing better because all those people should do is multiply my capabilities as a founder. Well, if you didn't document why you were good at user acquisition and you're relying 100% on a hire, sometimes it works. Like if somebody's coming from a company that had a ton of experience, they have a track record. But if you're hiring a pretty new employee and you're a new hirer and nothing's written down, you're kind of flipping a coin at best, right?
Right. Even if you are going to get equity, right?
Yeah. I mean, just giving, your new employees equity, not everybody, even your early employees are gonna feel the same way about the company as the founding team, right? And they'll still be invested, but getting back to that, and this is going to be the theme of what I'm doing with this thing. The entrepreneurial thing is like it's the lifeblood of some people. Like some people, this is what they do for fun, this is what they do professionally, and there's a different level of stake for people that are really going for it as a founder, co-founder, even than your first few hires probably. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's not a value judgment. Like in some ways, I think there's unhealthy aspects of being an entrepreneur and a founder, right? But but yeah, you can't just expect giving somebody equity, they're going to perform without any training or process or manual.
Yeah, or if there's just vesting associated with it, like, okay, they got to stay for a certain amount of time, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's not going to do it. So, what are the things that make you like most excited? What are you most thankful for as part of this? Like, what keeps you going through the ups and downs?
Honestly, I'm glad that I'm surrounded by a bunch of people that love to do what I love to do, which is, hunting mostly and fishing. Obviously, we have people on the team that are skewed one way or the other. But I'm excited to be surrounded by people like that. I'm excited because this hunting season, I have more hunting trips planned than I ever have. And that was one of the things when I set out to start Mallard Bay, I was like, I really want to, I want to do this a lot. And it's not just here in Louisiana, it's, all over.
That's awesome.
And having that balance, of course, is something that's important. At least you're up in the morning, right?
Right.
And so that's one thing.
Might have drank a little bit the night before. Maybe. Is that happened on any of those trips?
Just a couple times. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the things. It's like one of those, the thoughts that run through your head the morning of a hunt. You're like, God, I should not have stayed up till 3 a.m. and got up at 5 a.m.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I'm mostly excited. It's like there's a lot of play involved, like in our industry, because even if you talk to like brands, like everybody wants to go and do the drinking after everything. But what is really happening during those conversations is just relationship building. I'm really excited for that, meeting new people, building new relationships, making friends. That's really fun.
And, I thought a lot about this as we were setting all this up. Hunting and fishing, obviously some people are ethically against it or whatever. Look, I have family members and close friends that are vegan. I have a lot of friends and family that are hunters and fishers and meat eaters. What I've been surprised about is that a lot of folks on either side of that stuff seem to have a lot more in common almost than they don't. Like, it's the most staunch environmentalists I know are people in hunting and fishing. A lot of the earliest, I think, ecological groups are outgrowths of that kind of stuff. I don't want to get crazy political or philosophical, but I guess, I tend to look for similarities and commonalities among groups. And I know a little bit about you. It seems like from what I know, hunting and fishing there's a lot there that's more than just like the sport of it. Mm-hmm. There seems to be a spiritual side and like a deep connection to nature side. And, it's clear that passion comes out.
Oh yeah.
Right. In what you're doing when I talk to you about it. So maybe you could speak to that a little bit. Like,
yeah, I mean, I think that's a huge part of it. The conservation mindset. It's like it's not a core value of our company. The reason why it's not a core value of ours is because we all know that it's in us. Mm-hmm. Like we don't have to make it a core value because we all know that the ultimate goal of the company and also just our general mindset about the earth is like, you want to conserve what was there, like leave it the way you found it. You want to make sure that you can pass this trade, hunting on to somebody else below you. And also Josie has kind of opened me up to thinking about the way the nature and climate affects hunting in general, and kind of really make me conscious of the overall changes that happen every now and then, and kind of happen consistently. Like, it's all about the weather. It's all about, how you plan to make sure that it's there for the next year. So, we can't lose sight of that because it's very important overall that we focus on making sure that it's better than you found it.
Yeah. Well, that's great, man. And do you think you'd be able to pull all these long nights and endure the stress if it weren't something you really felt strongly about?
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, how much does that play a role in all this?
Absolutely not. I mean, it's crazy to think about, but it's weird to not want to go to bed because you want to work. Yeah. Right. And you probably get that too. Like,
yeah. I mean, I love it. Like they're like I'm saying, you have to find balance, and you have to be able to, in this world of startups and investing, you have to find a way to moderate like all these crazy ups and downs and there's the intensity of it. But yeah, if you really love it once you're in it, I mean, it's so fun. Like you're constantly engaged mentally, and you're talking with such smart, driven people that it's pretty infectious. Like it's a lot of other things honestly are kind of like hard to get you as excited about. Like you just developed a taste for it, and that's why so many entrepreneurs become serial entrepreneurs, and then also investors. And
right,
you see this cycle. One of the reasons I got this office on Magazine Street, I didn't realize it until probably about 10 years ago, because I kind of took this legal path. And part of the reason I think I took the legal path was because I grew up in a family where I don't think there was a single person, that worked for a company they didn't start. And as far back as I can remember.
Right.
So, I had great grandfathers who had like little Italian grocery stores on Magazine Street down the street.
Wow.
My dad had his own business. We were helping with that on nights and weekends. I was helping remodel offices, doing all kind of stuff. I was starting car washing businesses when I was 7 years old.
Yeah,
So
that's great.
I think part of like going into law might have been, it seems like a more stable profession. You're on this track. And then, I became super restless early. I'm like, I want to have my own firm. I want to work for companies I want. I have very like strong opinions on how to do this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, it's become a hobby and it's a career for sure. And there's
a hobby or an addiction?
I don't think it's an addiction, but don't let that thing. I don't think about it because I think it also draws people in that have those kinds of personalities,
mm-hmm.
and I think that's probably gonna be a theme that gets explored a lot here.
Yeah,
why are you really doing this stuff? There's definitely easier ways to live life, and you get more sleep, but at the same time, this is what it's all about. This is what I like. I live for it. I love it, and the key is staying balanced and staying centered, and realizing that like it's the people around you and the relationships you have with people that are the most important. You got to have people that love you for this to work. You've got to love other people and
mm-hmm.
cherish what they do to allow you to do this stuff.
Right.
And then you can't lose your head over it and go nuts. Some companies are going to work, some aren't going to work. You can't go into each one of these thinking yours is the next $1 billion company. And,
right.
You hope you learn a lot and you build valuable relationships and stuff in the process. It's my philosophy anyway.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it makes a valid point. Yeah. And you're not always going to hit a home run, right?
No.
It's one of those things that, it's always a possibility, but you got to swing for the fences.
Yeah, that's right. Anything else you want anybody to know?
I think the only question that you had on there was I think it was like my advice, or what would be my advice for an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I think
what's your advice to any entrepreneurs out there?
I think that it's a combination of listen, whether it's listening to the market or listening to the people around you. I think it's a combination of patience. I think that's something that I had to learn I'm 3 years into this, right? Yeah. And I'm still a little impatient, it's
so and that's a great one. That's not, patience is not a trait highly associated with enterprising individuals. So what aspect in particular on patience?
I think patience about, the process, like that what you're doing is a process, that it is a game and you're just playing the game. And sometimes the game's not going to go the pace you want it to go. Mm-hmm. And that when I say, I guess, patience, it's sometimes you want to be impatient, right? Yeah. With other people in some regards. In most regards, you want to be impatient with other people. Like you want them to move at your pace. You want them to do things the way you want them to do. But really, sometimes it takes a little bit of time to get to that point. Yeah. So that's kind of what I would leave everybody with.
That's awesome. Well, I think we'll leave it there. And I know patience is something I feel like I'm always working on, but I think it's invaluable advice. Thanks again, man, for coming by.
Absolutely. Honored to be here, man.
Awesome. Good. Thanks.